Great. So just a few more minutes and we'll be ready to start. Oh, okay. I hope you can hear me okay. Okay, perfect. All right, so thanks again for being with us today. My name is Francesco De Lorenzi. I'm one of the founders of PugliaTechs. And before diving into this session, it's going to be focused about growth from startup all the way to enterprise grade. I want to start with a bit of intro about us as an association. So it all starts with a pain point. It really starts with Bari, with Puglia, and the pain point is around the influx of talents moving out of Bari, out of Puglia, and looking for talents opportunity outside of the region. And how did we see this? We saw that there was a possibility, and it had to start from the ground up. It had to start as a grassroots community, and that's how we actually started. We considered Silicon Valley as a mindset, and the mindset can start from here. We want to unite tech enthusiasts, entrepreneurs, corporates, investors, and institutions, speaking to them directly to create this flywheel of opportunities for us and for the network around us. And for us to do this, we really want to create a possibility of growth through knowledge sharing, networking, and events like the one of today, both online and in person. And the vision is to create a tech renaissance from Puglia through Puglia that makes Puglia a global tech hub. And as we say, to drive innovation from our region, not by our region. So, little story about us. We can see that we have gained traction through universities, institutions, and corporates. And BurdaForward has been really supporting us from the beginning, so really grateful for that, as well as other great players from the sector here. In terms of presence, we are a little bit above 2,000 across members and followers across different channels. We have a Telegram channel that is more focused on the technical growth, and we have channels on LinkedIn and Instagram where we communicate. We create opportunities to discuss about more business topics. We are not looking to do this alone. We welcome you through looking at this QR code and scanning it to join us and be part of this community so that we can together foster talent sharing and opportunity sharing. So please scan this QR code and we'll see you on the other side. So I'll pass the word back to Maggie so that we can start the session on growth. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 4 amazing speakers today. They came from Germany, Luxembourg, and Portugal, and of course, Italy as well. But before we start with this, I'd like to really thank BurdaForward for hosting us now 3rd time. So hopefully there'll be a 4th time as well. And I'd like to invite Martina Andrulli, who is going to introduce BurdaForward.
Hello, everyone. So thanks for coming here. As my co-presenter was saying, of course, we are in BurdaForward office, specifically BurdaForward Italia, because BurdaForward itself is a German company, but here we are in the Italian office. So BurdaForward, first of all, is a media tech company, is of course based in Germany. So our market as media tech is based in Germany. We manage a lot of different editorial brands, such as, for example, Focus Online, Cheap, and others that are, I would say, quite famous, of course, in the German market. From 2019, we have also opened our Italian office where you are right now, and we started to grow, as would be also the scope of the speech today. So right now we are almost, or even more than 50 employees in the Italian office. And we have, of course, a lot of figures like developers, PMs, POs, and I mean, I'm personally also a tech lead of my team, which I'm glad that he's here, our data team, so thanks for coming also. But in general, like, to, of course, aim to have even more people joining the Italian office, because we really are looking for talents, and we want people to come back to the Apulian region and, of course, to work with us. So BurdaForward is basically a part of the group, which again is a German company, has a different location. Of course, in Italy, we have the Bari location, but in Germany, we have also other locations. The headquarters of BurdaForward is in Munich, but we have also, for example, Cologne, Hamburg, Berlin. So we are also like spread all over Germany. And as I said, like, we are also in the scope of media, but our role is basically all over. So we have a lot of opportunities for any kind of careers which is oriented to technology. So again, thanks for coming. The first speech will be handled by me and my colleague, Dieter Schneider, which is coming from Munich. So please. And yeah, so as I was mentioning, so we are part of the data team of the company, which means basically we work with data, and our speech will be about the content to habit loop. And I will hand over to Dieter just to explain this.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I don't often have mics in my hand, so I still gotta get used to this one. So yeah, my name is Dieter Schneider. I'm a senior content data platform developer at BurdaForward, and today, together with Martina, we will talk a little bit about a fundamental shift in how digital publishers need to think in order to grow their user base in the future. So yeah, first of all, that's how it works. We mainly want to talk about the so-called content to a habit loop today. This is more or less a mechanism or a concept which will enable or give the users more incentives to actually return to our websites instead of just being one-off visits. So in the past, we invested a lot in just getting one-off visitors to our websites through Google traffic and stuff like this. Of course, this is not very substantial when it comes to building out your user base. And as a digital publisher, we are reliant on traffic, and with that, of course, we need people to come back. And this content to habit loop is one mechanism or concept which should ideally, in the future, enable the users, or give the users incentive to essentially come back on a regular basis. Yeah, so solely relying on page views or just like one-off traffic is sort of an outdated strategy, more or less, for a digital publisher. It's not very substantial, doesn't gain us much, and that's why we want to, yeah, essentially give the users more of an incentive to come back, and that's where this comes from. Yeah. So first of all, this is a funnel chart which basically shows you the situation that we are in right now. We have a lot of visits, traffics on all of our platforms, but most of that traffic is essentially just, like I mentioned, one-off traffic. People that come from Google just stay on our website to read one article and essentially disappear afterwards. We don't want that. We, of course, want people to come back more often, ideally daily. As you can see in this funnel chart, the very top layer, essentially the total visits, the overall traffic that we have, and it progresses downwards until the very last layer, which symbolizes the daily loyal visitors, so people that regularly come back and visit the site on, let's say, on a daily basis, stuff like this. As you see, as it progresses downwards, we progressively lose users, and that's not what we want. Ideally, we want to have a good loyal base of users that come back on a regular basis, daily, stuff like this, and yeah, essentially gain our traffic from that. The hard truth is traffic in itself is does not equal loyalty. We invested a lot of resources in the past to just optimize for the first layer, not really for the last layer, and that's why we have a lot of people that just occasionally come and not regularly. That's what we want to invest more in over the future, and that's where this content to habit loop comes in. Essentially, how does it work? So it all starts with the user coming on a website and consuming content. In our case, it's mostly news content. They come in, they read an article, and when they do that, we essentially start to capture their behavior. Which articles are they reading? What elements on the website are they using? Stuff like this. How long do they stay on the articles? By tracking that data, we essentially learn about their interests and build up a profile of our users in the background. And those profiles we can then essentially use to tailor towards the user. So send out personalized newsletters, send out personalized push notifications in our apps, or tailor the complete website to the users in order to give them more of an incentive to essentially come back. And when they eventually come back, the loop starts all over again. That's essentially the concept behind it. Now, conceptually, it's simple. Mechanically, it's a bit complicated without the necessary data foundation. So you need a good database, a base of data to actually realize that. You need to have a good, reliable tracking of the user behavior. You have to be able to recognize users across websites, platforms, devices, and ideally you need to store the behavioral data in a centralized profile, which would then give us the ability to access historical behavioral data and based off of that essentially trigger the things that I just mentioned, like personalized websites and personalized newsletters, stuff like this. Yeah, that is essentially the concept behind it, and Martina will now tell you a little bit about how it is implemented on our end, certain concepts, how we plan to essentially utilize it even more in the future, and yeah, what our current setup looks like.
Yeah, so we start for the first, I would say, title, which is composable CDP. What does it mean? Is basically composable content data platform. So composable means basically that in the market of tech, you can take a lot of package as they are. So you just buy them, you use what the vendor is providing, and then you rely fully on what the market is doing. So you don't customize anything, you rely on something that somebody else is building for you, and then you get the output out of that. In our case, we instead prefer the composable one, which means basically you decide which technology you want to use in your tech stack, and then after that, you basically implement everything. It's not easy. It's a more long run to achieve what you want to do. But then in the end, it allows you to have multiple layers in which you can basically manage everything from the beginning till the end. And you can have a fully customization on top of that. Of course, this requires a lot of engineer powers for sure. But on the other side, it's more satisfiable, and you can also have the good thing about having your data in-house, which is something that right now it's also really important if you think about the big tech companies that are all around that are using third-party data. So in our case, we have, first of all, our tracking layer. We rely on Snowplow. Snowplow is basically a tracking system which originally we use as open source. Now we have self-managed system. Snowplow allows us to basically decide what to track out of the pages. So we basically decide which are the triggers that we want to use, which are the information that we want to track. And everything is centralized in our system using Tilium. Tilium is a UTag manager, which means basically you don't push the code on each brand's websites, because BurdaForward, as I said, is an ecosystem of brands. So we centralize everything using Tilium, which allows basically to push the code in the same place, and then this is spread all over the brands simultaneously. So this allows a fully control from the data team part, and this is of course like the same information then get from all over the brands. Then, of course, after that we track everything, we need a data storage. We need to, of course, have the data stored somewhere. In our case, we are using Snowflake as our main data warehouse, and we use then ClickHouse for our analytics warehouse. So the difference is basically that in Snowflake, we process the data, and in general, like we compute the data. We have a lot of what is called ETL. I don't want to go too technical, but in basically, you cannot use raw data when it comes to understanding the user behavior. You need to make some kind of math out of that to really understand what are the KPIs and the metrics that you want to cover. And then we move to ClickHouse, that instead is for our analytical purpose or analytics purpose. This means basically that the final users, which are our business teams in the company, needs to have an easy access to the data, needs to use the data, because to be data driven as company, you need to provide the data, and the business team needs to use them in the most easy ways possible. And ClickHouse is basically like serving for this purpose pretty well. It's pretty fast, and basically we are relying on this to allow the people in the company to explore and to really get the value out of the data. Then, of course, there is anyway a processing layer. We rely fully on dbt for the ETL part. I mean, again, not too technical, but basically dbt is, you can imagine like a tool that allows you to modify the data using programming languages so that the data are then consumable into tables. And instead then we use Flink. Flink is basically a streaming processing layer, processing tool, I would say, which allows us basically to also process the data in real time. Because this is also really, really important in our job, is like to react in real time to whatever is happening on our portals. Because as media company, we need to react to news, we need to react to whatever is happening in the world in general. So we cannot just rely on the historical data, like saying, okay, yesterday our user were doing this one, but we need to react also on what is happening on a real-time based. So then we said, of course, from data to triggers. So this means basically, just to give a concrete example, like, okay, and this is a project that we are working right now, like specifically in these months in our team. So basically we have, of course, as input the signal, so what the user is doing over our pages, how is interacting and so on. And we try to recognize a pattern out of that. So what is the interest of a certain user? Specifically in this moment, we are focusing on our app users because of course app users tends to be more loyal, in the sense that if you load an application on your phone, it's because you want to use that, ideally. Then we have, of course, the brain, which is basically what computes the logic out of that. And in our case, as I mentioned, it's like a mix of processing layer and data storage layer. And in general, we try to associate a certain segment out of the user pattern. And then there is the response, so the output, which means basically, okay, now that we got this information, what should we do out of that? And in this case, of course, you have multiple possibility. So one project that we're working right now is more or less what Spotify is doing. You can imagine like that. So it's recommending based on the taste of the user. Of course, and this is also really important, you cannot fully rely on what the user likes, because otherwise in our world you would be biased by what you see, because if you see just one topic, then you will always see that topic. And so we also need to put a kind of randomicity inside the process. But so far, this, like the final goal is always to ensure that the engagement is increasing and the user fully trusts on the articles that he's looking at, and so on and so forth. So as key takeaways, so why we have decided to do this pitch. So first of all, in general, our purpose as team and as company is to switch from the old version of just looking at the standard KPIs, like, okay, how was the traffic yesterday, what the people were looking at yesterday, but we want to move to a more oriented into, okay, how we should get the people to know our brand and to stay with our brand, so be loyal to us. What we have understood is that in order to do that, you cannot rely on just packages that you find online in the market, but you need to invest into technologies. You need to invest into allow the engineers to learn what is in the market and how to grow. And this is just possible if you decide to move to a composable CDP. Of course, again, it's not easy, but allows you to really cover everything from the start till the end of what your data are doing. Then important, as I mentioned, the real-time activation, which means basically in our type of business, you need to be ready to react as soon as something is happening, or, which is even better, even predict what the market will do. And how to do that is just by using the data that your users are providing to you before, or even social media data, for example. So everything that could be trending and can be anticipated. And then, of course, we have the scalable agility, which means, in general, the platform needs to be really flexible. It needs to ensure that you are adapting to the fact that data are never, or you are, I would say, we really hope that they will never be always in the same amount, but they are increasing. So also the technologies needs to be on the same level as the user behavior. And of course, then your entire tech stack needs to be in the same way. So yeah, thank you. Of course, if you have questions, I mean, I guess we will have anyway a networking moment later, but I don't know if there is some question right now already, but feel free, of course, to just ask me in detail later. Thank you for the attention.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can take one or two. And if not, we can talk more in the networking session. So thank you very much once again. Okay, now time for our next speaker. His name is João Mesquita. Yes, he's our hybrid Luxembourg Portuguese CEO and founder of Staceco. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, everyone. I just need to quickly grab here the clicker. Does it work? Perfect. Nice to meet you, everyone. So sometimes you actually don't need a brand new idea to build a great business. Sometimes instead you can apply modern lifecycle systems and modern growth tactics to an old market. And today in particular, I want to take the opportunity to show you how Staceco was actually applying this or using this philosophy to turn it into a workable business. So what does Staceco actually does? So we focus mostly on helping professionals finding temporary accommodation or long-term accommodation, basically without the need of navigating portals, multiple portals, or contacting multiple real estate agencies. So in particular, we focus on one particular question, which is how can we match the right person with the right home and the right provider at scale without wasting anyone's time and bringing a certain high quality of experience to the process. So we offer a wide range of accommodation, ranging from co-living, 1-bedroom studios, 2 bedrooms, and so on. And when we are actually moving to a new country, whether it's for a new job or for just training for a couple of months, you face a bunch of challenges. You either don't speak the country language or the language of the country, or you don't can afford really to make any big mistakes, because in the end, your place, your home in the new country is usually the one that can massively impact the overall experience that you will have in that country. And simultaneously, you will find yourself very often having multiple tabs open and needing to scroll to multiple portals, and at the same time losing a lot of, or relying mainly to basically do the work all by yourself without sometimes many or a lot of support. So having a background in marketing and analyzing also various other industries such as e-commerce or even info product industries, we thought, how can we do this a bit different and bring something different to the real estate industry? And actually an interesting point of Dieter before, which was the one-off traffic. So most of the traditional real estate portals actually focus mainly on bringing just the users to a portal, and then you are faced with multiple pages, hundreds of listings. You need to look at all the pictures, analyze, understand where to go, what are the errors, and so on. So we thought, how can we approach this differently? And we took a much more funnelized approach to the real estate. Whereas when you think about funnels and you think about e-commerce, it might be like as simple as you like a product, you visit the product page, you add it to the cart, and then you do a purchase, or you make a purchase. And we approach it very similar. So we collect newcomers moving to a new country. We highly focus on capturing high intent, or the intent before you potentially even know what you need or which kind of property you're looking for or what type of style. And from there, we try to qualify and match you with the right home, all while distributing you to multiple housing or to the right housing provider. Now, even though this sounds very simple, in reality, the traditional real estate is actually much more complicated than this, as you can see right here. To really move you from just searching an apartment to getting you through the formalities and actually moving in and living in or finding the perfect match, so to say, you actually need to do many different steps. And this overall results in the industry having multiple back and forth communications with multiple agencies, sending you sensitive documents everywhere to multiple stakeholders in the market, impacting overall the experience. So that's why we decided afterwards to come up with what we call MyStaceco, which is basically our way and our funnelized ways to streamline the entire process from start to finish. So instead of browsing multiple portals, multiple listings, and go at it all by yourself, you can just submit a simple form, and through that form you will be knowing exactly at what stage or where you are at which stage, and also from there we will help you source the right accommodation and in the end also match you with the right housing providers at the same time. So this is our way to bring a higher or more quality experience to especially professional movers that very often are making a big life decision and often are potentially afraid or worried or stressed moving to a new country. On top of that, a real estate transaction is in specific now a rental transaction is often a few thousand euros a month, and if you rent for a year, it's even higher. So this is considered in many industries actually a high ticket sales. And this, in our opinion, often requires more high touch support, which we end up doing through something I will show in the next slide. So instead of treating it as a simple 20 euro Amazon purchase, where you just go to a product page and you try to buy it, like through browsing multiple portals, we actually use something what we call more, or how we like to call it, the human system hybrid approach, where we use mainly transactional email journeys. So as soon as you sign up, you get automated emails to help you guide through the process. We maybe might send some welcome booklets to ease the pressure as well about a new area, new country, new city. And simultaneously, we like to use customized sales rep outreach using tools such as CRMs, so on top of the automated emails, which a lot of real estate players, for example, neglect these types of parts in this case. So when you move to a new country, you often can come in multiple ways or through multiple sources or channels. So you either sometimes look by yourself, or you might get support through certain agencies that you do this as a business, or you might even get support through your own HR at your company. So in order to be able to support that, we built our own operating system in the back, so our own infrastructure, to have one tool, but to support and be adaptable to multiple journeys. So no matter whether you are looking, for example, for temporary housing or long-term housing, we can actually adapt ourselves and cover both. So my original idea for this presentation is also to get back to the previous point, which is sometimes you don't need to revolutionize the world or have an entirely brand new idea to start a business. In my opinion, very often, in order to compete in an existing market, there are very useful 3 questions that especially us as a startup like to focus on, which is, can you acquire the same customer cheaper or through channels competitors ignore? Can you convert, even if it's just a tiny bit better than your competition? And can you transact more often with the same customer? Throughout the presentation and the points that I was mentioning, that's exactly what we tried to do, and that's why I wanted to present this kind of case study, where for the acquisition, we use much more this funnelized approach through this platform where we guide all our users, instead of just letting you browse all by yourself through multiple portals. For the conversion, we use the human system hybrid approach to improve conversion overall and bring a human touch to a system, at the same time trying to make it scalable but not lose the human touch. And then for the frequency, we use our internal infrastructure that over time has been built and adapted to suit multiple journeys of depending on the person that is moving to a new country. And overall, if we go back to the original questions, if you manage to do just a few or all of them, ideally, then you either end up having a better conversion rate than your competitors, meaning for the same exact customer, you can actually make a bit more money, or you can even, ideally, also acquire them more cheaply. So overall, as probably all of you might know that word, cost of acquisition, the CAC, you overall, if you have one of both or you master all 3, you will be able to effectively, even as a smaller company or even a startup, compete in an existing market, because these 3 create a very interesting unit economics, and also making overall the business fundable in the eyes of investors when you are able to acquire either customers cheaper, or you acquire them even at a similar price level, but you transact more often with your same customer, allowing you to basically reinvest more in acquiring more of those. So if you master all 3, you will end up having very nice unit economics overall as a company. Thank you very much for listening, and then if you have any questions, feel free to shoot.
Thank you very much. It was super interesting. Do we have any questions? Okay. Good.
First of all, amazing presentation. Just a quick question on frequency. So in a potentially static legacy market, how do you approach frequency? How do you ensure that you can keep a longer interaction and sell other services?
So this is more through customer discovery. So the more and more we obsess over learning all the problems and so on about our own customer, and building out the business, we ended up noticing, for example, if you move to a different country, very often you have legal process, especially Germany, for example. It's similar to Luxembourg, but Germany as well. So if you move to a different country and you're looking to move your whole life to that country, for example, then you might actually need to first be in that country to start some legal processes and documentations, so that you are even able to, in the first place, to visit a few places and find something for the long term, so for a couple of years. So throughout these findings, we ended up building the infrastructure in the back and tried to see what are really adjacent products that still keep the business scalable, but can be offered to the same exact customer, so that we can, in the end, transact more often with the person moving. And that we ended up starting in temporary, working with often B2B, opening the B2C, and then also starting getting into the overall more typical rental as well. And then you have various other things such as insurances and so on and so forth. So everything that can be somewhat connected to your product could be interesting to see if you can offer it in a scalable way, either through partners or whatever solution you might find that doesn't break the scalability overall.
Thanks very much.
Oh, okay. Thanks for your presentation, first of all. Then just a little bit about the human system hybrid. I mean, how do you add the little bit of touch, as you mentioned, of human side in that process?
Yes. So when you sign up to a platform, usually many companies use automated outreach through any kind of system that allows to do that and build email campaigns and so on. And so what we do additionally, since we still, like I mentioned in the presentation, we consider this still a high ticket sale because it's a few €1,000 for a property. We were looking for ways to bring this human touch and keep it still scalable. So a very simple example, which is what we actually also do to keep it scalable but bring a human touch, is having automated emails, yes, to tell you that you signed up, what is next, and so on, to keep track of the whole process. But simultaneously, we have a dedicated sales rep that might reach out to you via email. So in our initial funnel and sign up, we also collect phone numbers, emails, and so on, and sell it more as a customized support. So if you want customized support, input your phone number, and people end up putting in their phone number, and then we have a dedicated sales rep in the CRMs with also half automations, but also the rep doing its job and bringing the human touch, potentially using channels such as WhatsApp, phone calls, and so on and so forth, to help us push the people through the funnel and bring a much better experience overall. Because like I said, many of them are very stressed when moving to a different country. So we were looking for ways to counter this in a way, and also improve our sales conversions as well at the same time.
Okay, anybody else? Last question? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now, last but not least, we have Francesco De Lorenzi once again. He's not just the co-founder of PugliaTechs, he's also the CEO and founder of LeaderNova. Welcome.
Thank you again. Great. So I'll just quickly get the remotes and we should be good to start. Great. So we saw growth from an enterprise perspective, startup and scale-up perspective. What about very early stage, or what about products and vibe coding? So vibe coding is a big buzzword right now. I think everyone in a certain way across multiple fields is using it. But how does it look when it goes production, and how can we ensure reliable scaling of something that was born from vibe code? So one of the core bits from my perspective is staying secure. And this is a broad term, not only secure from a cybersecurity perspective. So quick intro about myself. I'm Vice President of PugliaTechs and CEO and founder of LeaderNova. My background is in technical leadership, starting with around decade with my former agency, and then moving into technical leadership with multiple companies, in particular with Onport, where we had experience also with enterprises and exit. So that was an interesting experience. But what really connected the dots was application security. Story says that when I was around 12, I built this antivirus tool that allowed me to look at tech from the lens of cybersecurity. So even through different legs, the dots that will be connected will be through cybersecurity and an eye on forensics. So even now that there's this influx of AI-assisted coding and vibe coding, the lens is still there. So still on this point, what we do at LeaderNova is we approach technical leadership through the eyes of the business. So this is a motto that I am quite fond of, as my grandpa gifted me my first computer when I was 9. So what we try to do every day is try to do something that we can explain to someone who is not in tech. So that's a little background from our approach to things. But now let's dive into it. Typical story, you build an app through any of the vibe coding tools. We're not going to mention any in particular. And what happens is, how long until someone walks in? This is a two-sided question. So the first thought would be, how long until the first user who is not part of your group? But are we sure that the only users that walk into our vibe coded app are the good ones? What about the bad fellows? And statistics say that it can take less than 5 minutes for a vibe coded app to be hacked. And this applies to 1 in 10 apps. And sometimes it requires 0 hacking tools. Probably your browser is sufficient. So what do I mean with this? We can think about a typical example. So John Doe might be an excited vibe coder, early stage founder that wants to solve a problem in the therapy field, in the psychology field. So he wants to allow therapists to not have to take notes, but actually take notes through an online app. And so he builds Vault Notes. It's built to Direct and Superbase. It's vibe coded. It's deployed. And the Superbase security advisor says everything looks good. There's no insecurity there. But the question is, how long does it take for an attacker to actually extract every session that was recorded, even the ones that the user has said, I actually want to delete them? For us to be able to actually see this in real life, I created this fictional web-coded app, like we said, also boasts all those typical security bits on raw security, automatic backups. So it's very important. We don't deal with the database. We give it to another database as a service. So what we can see is Francesco, his friend, has tried to log in. Everything looks good. The app has the patient's data entry, has some session notes, and his friend says, okay, let me just take a look into Superbase. How's the auditing? And if you look into the auditing, we'll see that everything looks okay. There's no errors. The only warning is on leaked password protection disabled. So it may not warn about something easy password or leaked password, but there's no big error there. So potentially John Doe, the vibe coder, might feel everything looks good. So I think, let's see, has it stopped? Okay, there we go. So now Francesco +1 tries to log in. He will go ahead and potentially create a patient, and there's a session that says, okay, all good. So that's his interaction into the app. So just a normal one. Now, this is an internal tool that we built for auditing vibe-coded apps. So in this case, what we can see is that the attacker has used these 2 accounts that he created and is going to try and see what's the actual security posture of this application. And just within a few seconds, like we said, it would take a few seconds, this little internal tool identifies that actually the table session notes has row-level security disabled. And as we see a bit more in depth, even the patients are not so gated, one user from another, and even the profiles, even the licenses. So it's a bit more risky than what seemed to be from the initial eyes. And this is probably just from a risk, say, assessment perspective. But how long would it take for an attacker to take a full copy of the database of that application? So let's see how it's done. There's another internal tool, obviously only when there is a specific agreement or when it's our own internal tool, so only a lawful type of tool. And there we go. So within less than a second, this tool was able to take a full copy of the database, looking also at very sensitive material, deleted ones that might have been marked as deleted, as well as the user bits of information. I do understand that that also looking at this example is quite sensitive, but I think this is also a memorandum for the impact that vibe-coded tools can have and how easy sometimes users would lean towards solving problems and dealing with very sensitive data and exposing people to the risk. So it's a bit of a social memorandum there on what happens behind the scene and the risk beyond compliance and business risk. But quick step backwards. We have been bombarded in terms of trends with no-code developments, and now the new big tool, I think it's probably 100x as a multiplier, is vibe coding. But if we compare them one with another, what we see is that vibe coding goes by the saying with great power comes great responsibility, and the inability of being able to read the code gives great responsibility to someone that may not be able to protect the assets. So compared to no-code applications where the abilities and the framework is limited, but also a lot of responsibility is left into the SaaS software that manages those assets, with vibe coding, there's a lot at stake for the builder. It's important to know this when using it, both for internal product tools, but also when building it in public. And it goes by security, it goes by implementing access controls, by being able to defend against positive, which will be increase of traffic from legitimate traffic, from PRs, from releasing on product hunt versus malicious traffic. So it's an important memorandum to compare with no-code platforms where you might potentially bump your subscription and leave all the rest in the hands of your SaaS supplier. What's the background behind this? So all of this data is backed by these little fine prints, so from reports that we can find online. So almost half of AI-generated code is in a way insecure, and for those who take pride in still writing codes by hand, I think it's very still debatable, but data says that code written by engineers as such can go up to a third in terms of insecurity, and absolutely that makes perfect sense. But this gives us about of a sample of what's behind vibe coding. So one of the points that I see is that perception of security. So security theater in this sense is some of the audits that we see that may give this sense of security, but sometimes that requires a bit more testing. So if the dashboard shows protection is on, rules exist, two-factor is enabled, this may cover some of the cases, but there's a lot more that is in the hands of the builder. And these are some of the questions. So what about, are these rules blocking everything? Are they blocking some of the happiest path? Is there ways to actually break the jail, as they call it, the row-level security jail, the tenant isolation? Is there any hidden backdoor, maybe not in the database layer and some other pieces? So this is an important point here. And again, just to reiterate on the numbers, there's also a lot of risk on the exposure of credentials and keys apart from the numbers. So what are the things that break? For those that are engineers, absolutely, that's quite obvious, but let's quickly go through what can break the most, can be broken the most in apps built by vibe coding. So one is definitely the database. So in this sense, it's very easy to have access to the database through the outermost layer. So for example, with Supabase, it's through Postgres, but that layer is usually the outermost. So there's very little, as we say, little defense in depth. Keys may be visible. So there's a lot of responsibility left in the builder to make sure that the keys, the API keys, are not accessible, they're not left in the front end, they're not environment variables that can be easily leaked. And this has serious business impacts on builders. We have cases where a builder has exposed a Gemini key, and that has had an increase of cost because of the leak up to $100,000. So that risk is real and can literally jeopardize a business and potentially the founder's finances as well. Login screen can be a decoration in the sense that a lot business layers sometimes are implemented by these tools in the front end. Everything looks great until someone realizes that that was just the outermost. It was just decorative. There's no speed limit, so there's risk of potential brute forcing. There's risk also of misuse of the platform with spike in infrastructure costs and that tenant jail that we saw. So the risk for other users' data being easily accessible through one of the typical ways that malicious actors can use, even very simple, just the browser sometimes. So definitely the invite is not for vibe coders to take a full engineering course. There's two different paths, and there's lots that builders can build by putting business and product at core. But there's something I can pass along, and one is to use some of the approaches that are typical of engineers with an application security mindset. And one is the Stride framework. It comes from Microsoft. It's pretty old, was initially released in 1999, but I think it's pretty current, and it can be an easy way for a builder to look at features being built, also from a negative, a malicious user perspective. And it goes by the acronym. So thinking about, can someone pretend to be me? Can there be a potential spoofing? What about tampering and repudiation? And here the point is also on not necessarily a hack in the most common sense, but also protecting the business from liability. Can someone misrepresent reality and ask for claims in my SaaS because they've changed the course of actions in the app? Can I defend? Can I preserve that evidence? As well as info disclosure, we saw it very clearly, but also denial of service. Can someone take my site down while I'm spending $1,000 per day on Google ads? And can I prevent from this to happen? And finally, elevation of privilege. Can someone pretend to be or make it so that my application believes he's an admin instead of a user? So when you're building apps and when you're also talking to your assistants, it's important that you approach these questions and you influx these building secure codes, but also, if possible, talking to your assistants to enforce some of these guardrails, if possible, as of course vibe coding has some limits there. Now, still on that point, generally when building through these tools, the main definition of done, I would say, is that the application works. So it's testable, it's been presented to a close-knit group, and it works perfect. So it loads, the user can sign up, data saves, it looks professional. But that's tip of the iceberg when we look at production grade application, and when we look at growth, something that is defensible in production. So I would see it on two sides. One is security, we already talked about it. Protection of data, keeping the keys safe, keeping the jail of the different users safe, and preventing abuse to a certain degree, but also performance. So that's another important bit when looking at taking your product to production. So, like we were saying, usually there's just one, the first bit that lots of vibe coding apps are focused on, but there's two other parts that are quite critical. Now, when we talk about a fully audited app, there's a bit more, of course, than what we see. So it's important to look at not only access control that we saw before, but there's different angles. So looking at the full discovery, so what's the exposure? You may be connecting to a lot of different APIs, a lot of different components may be built even through vibe coding. So it's important to have that full discovery, what can be exposed, what are the risks, where are your secrets kept? Is it easy for those secrets to be leaked? How's the performance today, and how's the performance when your traffic goes 10x, 100x? And how about the infrastructure? And also with the upcoming deadlines on the AI Act, are you ready today for compliance? And finally, the deliverable is expected to give you the status quo and what can be done next. What can you do, or can an engineer do to take your product to production readiness? Usually there's different ways, so you could either provide just access, that's what's called more black box assessment or penetration testing. There's also a way to also provide access to the code to analyze it statically. There's benefits on both sides, but usually that's what you would expect from an audit. But what about today? So if you're building products through vibe coding apps, what is the takeaway right now? So enable row-level security, look at where your API keys are and move them to a vault, ideally. At least make sure that they are variables and they're not exposed on the outermost front-end layer, and check that your auth does actually provide protection against authenticated access. If you're using Node, for example, it's very likely make sure that your packages are not outdated. You may be writing secure code, but maybe there are some packages that the tool doesn't know what's the latest version, so you might inheriting some outdated packages that are vulnerable. So it's very important that you map all the packages that have been installed in your project to make sure that they're all secure, and also all the dependencies down are secure. And this command can be run can already give you a high-level situation of your package, of your project. This week, going a bit more in depth, add rate limiting, defend against abuses, testing if that jail is actually working, that tenant isolation, searching in different ways, manually, ideally not automated, check not only the index HTML, but looking at all the different assets, especially the compiled ones, to see if is there anything that we are leaking there that we shouldn't, both providing information that if leaked can already help an attacker, or even if you just leave the door open or leave the keys at the entrance. So at different layers, it's important, and more in-depth setting up cores and content security to prevent misuse, such as, for example, phishing and other types of cross-site scripting. What about this month, potentially, or next month, since we're already towards the end? So ideally, as you're moving to production grade, look at also defense in depth. Maybe it makes sense to move the database calls behind the server, so not exposing directly the database as a service, but having a backend for frontend, so using potentially Next to build an application layer and a business layer. Getting a proper security audit before going live would be great, and then also keeping observability to a minimum state, minimum level for what you're building, but still knowing what's happening, being able to react or be proactive if possible. And like we said before, also not only security, not only the reputation, compliance, business risk, but also what about in 10x per traffic, 100x per traffic? How's it going to react? Am I ready for those big numbers that I'm looking for? And this is a slide photograph, so that's the takeaway for today. That's anyone that is using vibe coding tools without an engineer next to them by their sides, on their team or external, should focus on today. So I'll leave it there for any questions. The checklist that I mentioned before, not the last one, 2 slides back, is also for you. So it's important you all apply those steps in the audit. And if you need me and our team to take a look at your app, we're here to help. And also any other questions.
Thank you for the presentation. So you stated that with the AI and vibe coded, the percentage of application with security flawless are 3 times than before, right? Something like 2.7. So do you think it's because of the AI itself that it's not that still good enough to generate good code, or it's because it's more for the human that use the AI in a wrong way? I mean, I'm pretty sure nowadays, and probably in the future, the AI will write better code than engineers, probably also avoiding, I don't know, like Stack Overflow, very complicated code that we have to look to avoid security issue. But I think also the best practice you presented are for an engineer something that we should go through, and often we forgot, so we have always problems. So my question is, it's more because of AI misusage, or AI itself because the language model are not that good enough, or because of the human part?
I think it's the human part, both sides. Probably a little bit I would say the naivety of non-engineers using a very powerful tool without being able to read. So that's probably affected, but also sometimes we as engineers thinking that we can spawn, let's say, a cursor agent or a code agent and have a quick look at the PR, trust it, and merge it. So we can also take that part of not being very diligent sometimes. So I think it's, I wouldn't say the numbers, this is my personal opinion, but it could be 70-30, where 70 is the influx of the ability to code given to those who can't read it. So it's left to a lot of skills that are set up on an AI assistant tool. So there's a lot of variables that can be controlled. There's a lot of different ways for non-engineers to generate code. So that non-standard approach can leave unattended effects. But on the other side, I strongly convene that if we look at large enterprises, the ability to request a small change from Slack and see it completely released in production with no surveillance, probably XXS cards, but still it's happening. So it probably, my opinion, the more we go enterprise grade, the more there can be very complex pipeline where there's static analysis, dynamic dust, unit testing, integration testing, where large enterprises can afford to literally fix through Slack conversations from non-technical people, whereas the more there's the human factor, and maybe there's not such a structure, the more there needs to be a human eye and a human pipeline to prevent from those things from happening. So I would see the two sides. I think we're there, it's how we use it. So in the end, it's our fault, I would say.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, then thank you very much, Francesco. We are towards the end of our talks, but not towards the end of the event, because now it's the most fun, most awaited, most exciting part, which is the networking. You can go towards the other room in a bit. But thank you all for being here in person. And for anyone who is watching us online, we hope to see you next time in April for our next event. So yeah, thank you all.